Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. It's lovely to be here with all of you. I am getting my butt kicked by allergies today. My whole face feels so heavy and full. Like my sinuses aren't full, but it's just like around my eyes and my sinuses feels like very heavy. It always makes me feel sleepy. But otherwise, I'm not bad. I been really looking forward to this. If you aren't already following us, please consider giving us a follow. Um, at some point in the near future, when we hit a follower goal, we're going to do a community day, which would be pretty fun. We'll do some kind of event. I'm still figuring out what that's going to be, but I think that we can do some fun things together. Um, and then I'm very tired today. That's the main idea. So yeah, we're gonna do like we normally do and just chill out for a little bit in the beginning. And also, if you want, you can give us, hello, Reverend Mort. You can join our Patreon to get exclusive access to some special content and early access to things. We've got some big projects that we're working on. And if you didn't check out the stream from this past weekend, I really recommend it because we had a very good conversation. It was me and my co-director Ash and the former director of Consent Academy SAR talking about autonomy and abortion and Mother's Day. And Reverend Mort, you said I was about to say sorry about your face, but I realized that would read less like sympathy, more like an insult. Yes, and I accept the sorry about your face. Um, yes, yes, my face is heavy, always. Okay. Anyway, thank you all for coming to hang out with me today. Like I said, very excited. I had a bunch of blueberries for lunch. It was pretty good. Pretty happy about that. Okay. So got some memes, got some things to talk about, got an article to read, got a bunch of recommendations of like other content that I really want you all to check out. And I got a very, very energetic Nightbot today who's already like, tell us your thoughts about the stream. Um, Yeah, Carlin, more communalism, less individualism. Yeah. So then here we got this first meme. I got this from Reddit, and it says overfull capacity. Public transit, it's the strong Shiba, says it's crowded but still transports massive amounts of people. And then the crying Shiba, it says anything can cause congestion and everyone barely gets anywhere or gets barely anywhere. So I think this is just, hi to Tibran, a great example of one of the ideas of like crowded public transport tends to still be fine. And like maybe it's very crowded, but you still end up getting where you're going most of the time, where you just have to wait for the next train or the bus or something. Whereas if you're in really bad traffic, you often won't move at all. Like I think about when I've gone to like concerts or performances or events or anything, how often there's this like pressure if you drove there to like leave before the event is over because otherwise it's going to take you an extra hour or more potentially to get home. And that means that you get to have less enjoyment of it, right? And that means that the whole time during the performance or the event, there's part of you that's like recognizing, hey, I need to stop what I'm doing sooner so I can leave. You can't just kind of like relax as much, especially if you're going to see a concert and then there's usually like, you know, the bands that come on before the band you're usually there to see, and then you end up having to leave before the band you're there to see has finished performing. And then it also means that like if you're especially near like front of stage, you're going to have a harder time anyway. It's just an issue overall. And I think that this if you have good public transport to and from venues, arenas, stadiums, that kind of thing, and it's really focused on public transport, and you could even have like satellite parking spaces that have different ways to like get to different highways or whatever if you really want that, but having the main sort of way in and out of the building be walking or public transport, that can really help a lot. And I think it would help people enjoy the event more. And also just like morning traffic. Like I just think about how so many people cede like at least 2 hours of their day to commuting and sitting in a car and being frustrated. Like, hi BP Phantom. I think it's fine like if I'm sitting on a bus and I have like a 40-minute bus ride or something or train ride. It's not great. Like I like to live closer to any place I have to go, like work or school, but I can actually do something then. I can put on like my nice noise canceling headphones and I can listen to music and I can relax, or I can read a book, or I can like prepare for the day, or I can chat with people, whatever. But you can really do that if you're driving, especially if you're in like stop and go traffic or traffic that's really dynamic. You have to be extra paying attention. It's actually really stressful. I hate driving in that. Yeah. Reverend Moore, you said public transit to public venues. That sounds good, but what if instead we just put bunch of people, a bunch of 4 people cars in a tunnel loop? Yep, like problems, problems. Okay, so this is the first meme. I thought it was just pretty cute. I have a random PSA sort of meme. This just came across Reddit. It was, I think, on Ask Women, and people were talking about like what's the stupidest thing you've been taught as a woman or femme person to like be, or even just an AFAB, be insecure about. And people were talking about hip dips, and I was like, you know what? Let's talk about hip dips for just a second. People have this idea that hip dips are some kind of like deformity. I've even seen it called like the violin deformity. And there's a lot of problems with that. But the main thing is it's not something wrong. It's literally just your bones. Like as you can see here, right, you have the shape of the hip bone, right, the top crest here, and then you have the actual like outer part of the leg right here, and these two things together create this shape. Some people will gain more fat right in this little area here, and it will cover that. But for the most part, there's not like more structure there. Like this is just the way the bones are shaped, and so it's very, very normal for people's bodies, and not just women, of course, to have this. And for some people, it's more pronounced. It has to do with sort of the shape of the hip whole region, like the top of the hip bone, and then also the outer point of your thigh, and sort of how far out does this little bit go, and like how high or low is it relative to the angle that the hip connects into the socket. But it's not a problem. It's not a deformity. There's nothing wrong with it. And I don't know. I think a lot of the time it looks cute. That's just my personal opinion. I think we get really sad about it, but it's completely normal. And like it's just your bones. It's just your bones. So like um the idea that we should feel insecure about what our bones look like makes my head hurt. Anyway, all right, next one. People, I've been thinking a lot about cars. Obviously, you all know that I'm not a huge fan, but I've been thinking about like different types of ways that we give cars a lot more space and like give them a lot more resources in our towns and cities, and just how much bigger they've been getting. And this is just like a kind of standard truck, and this is just a kid, and you can see it barely even comes up to the headlights. And that's really scary to me. Reverend Moore, you said, okay, did Shabron, you joked about it being like, okay, Elon, about the loop. I like it. Reverend Moore, you said, to be fair, since when has the body image issues of society let something as silly as inviolable physical reality stand in the way of unrealistic expectations? Exactly. Carolyn, I do not understand how so many people think a person that says such dumb things and launches such dumb projects is so brilliant. Yes, Elon Musk, ridiculous human. He's also just not very cool. Like, I don't know where he's gotten this like image of being super cool. Yeah. Anyway, and Reverend Moore, as you say, you make money, you must be smart. Yeah, I mean, ugh. Anyway, looking at this picture of this truck, you know, even somebody who's driving a truck like this or a vehicle this large, who is trying to be a safe driver, who's trying really hard to not cause problems and is trying to be very aware, when you have it this large and so many people are not, you're not going to be able to see them over either the front end or the back end. And even with cameras, I was trying to remember the word that some people can have where they have like don't hit somebody. It's just a lot, right? It's a lot to think about how many people die constantly from getting hit by cars, how sort of easy it is for people to forget that they're driving like this big, dangerous metal machine and they don't always interact with the people around them and the people sharing the spaces with them as with, I think, enough honor for what it is they actually are getting to use, like this heavy machinery. And, you know, we just take so many risks and we really put almost all of the pressure on the people not in cars to not get killed by cars. Reverend Mort, you said, I mean, okay, we could modify the incredibly oversized machine of metal to make it more safe for children, or we could make all of our kids walk on stilts everywhere. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and what would happen if this kid got hit by a car? Probably the parents would be blamed. Why weren't you watching where they were going? Why were they allowed to walk by themselves? Oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? But the thing is we fundamentally, this is a systemic issue. We're fundamentally setting up a structure in a system that makes this inherently more dangerous. And I have no way to consent to the like danger that cars put. And sometimes I think about like sitting at these little outdoor cafes or the outdoor spots of cafes that are along sort of busier roads. And I don't like to sit there anyway, just because of car exhaust. I tend to like the ones that are in sort of like pedestrian only squares or streets or on like side streets. But to me, it's just like we're so lucky because if one person driving along this road has a momentary lapse in their attention or a momentary loss of control of their vehicle, they can just plow into this outdoor cafe completely accidentally. And we don't even think anything of it. It's mind boggling. Mind boggling. And you're right, BP Phantom. I've seen pictures of full grown adults being invisible to a pickup driver with some trucks. Yeah, I mean, like I definitely am. I'm only 5 feet tall or 153 centimeters tall. So, like, it's really easy for me to not be seen by cars. And it doesn't have to be this way. And, like, the kinds of streets that people need to sort of use for their daily life don't necessarily need to be the same streets that we're like moving heavy machinery down and like especially at high speeds. And yeah, Paladin Hulk, you said, I live in Europe. There is one person in my town who owns an American car. It does not fit into any parking spaces and is constantly in the way of people in traffic. Yeah. I mean, especially if you live in any of the sort of like older European cities, big size cars don't really fit a lot of the time. And Krellin, you said people buy high clearance vehicles because they make them feel safer, but high clearance vehicles make you and everyone around you less safe. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It just, for so many reasons, people, you know, they can roll more easily a lot of the time. You can hit things that can, like, you know, I think of like poles that are supposed to like make it so you don't drive forward. If you don't see that and you drive right into that, you can get very, very injured, even in one of these big trucks. And then people tend to drive more recklessly, either the person driving the bigger vehicle, but also the people around them, because we tend to have this idea of like it's so safe, but it's really not. It's just really not. And it's one of those things that, yeah, it doesn't really occur to people until they get injured or a crash happens. So then there's another one. Still got to load. This is also related. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And this is advice in New York, you can see down here, to pedestrians and cyclists. It says, be seen, obey traffic laws. Okay. Asking pedestrians and cyclists to obey traffic laws is completely reasonable, and they should. It definitely frustrates me when you have cyclists who just think, okay, I can just go regardless of what the lights say because it's I have the right of way. Or people who are like, oh, the car's going to hit me, whatever, I'm just going to walk out. Like, yeah, there are times where it's like, yes, like I have the right of way. The person's pulling into people who stop in pedestrian crossings. I usually stare them down or give them a little bit of shit because it's like, you're making me then have to walk into more dangerous spaces in order to move. And like, you should know never to do that. Like, that's this standard driver's ed kind of thing. But we have here like all this advice: look left and right, be alert, don't text or listen to music, wear a helmet, walk facing traffic, bike with traffic, be bright at night, watch for turning cars, exit buses with caution, safety is no accident. But the thing is, we're putting a ton of pressure on people to not get killed, when really most of the pressure should be on the people who might kill somebody to be more thoughtful. Yes, we can always talk about risk reduction. It's the same sort of thing where people say, like, oh, if you go to a bar, don't leave your drink unattended. Make sure that you're always keeping an eye on anybody who might mess with your drink, and don't go there alone, and yada yada. Like, sure, these are some risk reduction steps, maybe, but if somebody wants to hurt somebody, is just that entitled that they don't think about it, or you know isn't really in control of what they're doing, like I think especially about with driving cars, isn't doing it responsibly, no amount of risk reduction ever equals prevention, right? And the prevention of pedestrian and cyclist deaths is most of the time on the drivers and also the city planners. And it's tough. Yeah, and Reverend Mort, you said, jokes on you. I buy them because they reassure me that I'm tough and masculine. But yeah, they're a perfect example of perfection does not equal reality, or perception does not equal reality. And it's really tough, right? Because it's like, just think of how many people die unnecessarily in, interactions with vehicles. It does not, these are people who are dying when they really just don't actually need to. And we have so many other options. And given how, like, I don't know, like inattentive and irresponsible I think the average person is, and this is not a judgment, I'm just talking about like there's so many demands on our attention and there's so many things we have to be responsible for all day, every day, that like it's not possible to do it all very well. So when I think about the kind of like cognitive load pressures we're putting on people anyway, then expecting them to operate this really dangerous heavy machinery around a bunch of vulnerable people to me seems scary, right? And we're kind of creating a world where it's really hard for people to have other choices as well. And I'm not blaming the individual here. It's like a big collective issue. So yeah, this image just made me really sad because I was like, wow, that's a lot, a lot of like constant thinking that we have to do to not get murdered by heavy machines. Cool. All right. The next one, this is just a funny tweet. This guy, John Rika, says, cars are bad. They're bad for the planet in general and cities in particular. We should be doing everything in our power to make them unnecessary, subjecting our citizens to the debt, danger, and destruction they cause, and calling it freedom is the worst kind of gaslighting. And I think this is a big thing because we've talked about this before, like PR marketing, like decades of it, to get us to equate being in a vehicle and owning a private vehicle as like you have more freedom. But the thing is it's comes at such a high price. And it actually, I think, our car obsession has reduced our freedom as a whole because so many of us live in places where you can't actually function without a car. So many things that are like life necessities are inaccessible without cars. We often live in places where, like, if you're trying to walk or bicycle versus drive, it's incredibly dangerous. And then we don't invest as much in public transit and other options like creating more walkable and bikeable communities. And so that means that, like, instead of getting this public investment through taxes, we're having to spend a lot of private money, like our own money, to have these vehicles. It's just a lot of costs. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, it really adds up. Um, and so you have less freedom when it comes down to it because cars are very expensive. There's a lot of risks that are taken to health, not just in the idea of crashing, but just like pollution and noise pollution, like air and noise, the sort of like plastic that comes off of tires, the sort of, there's lots and lots of terrible things. And we've just kind of become accustomed to it. And we don't realize how much we're sacrificing for kind of false freedom. And it's not to say that we should never have cars, right? Like, there are definitely situations where they make sense. Things like, you know, if we need to have trucking to, hi, Lo-Fi Prince. We need to have trucking to get things to go, to get goods in and out of cities and towns and transport things. We need like buses for tours, like, you know, politicians going on a tour or bands going on a tour or like whatever. Like, there's plenty of things where it's absolutely what makes the most sense, but not at the scale that we're doing it at right now. And we've all kind of just been gaslit and like really have a hard time thinking otherwise. I was watching a thing on DW News recently. It was this like interview with some people who live in this town that's on the border. It's like a little bit north of Berlin and it's on the German-Polish border. And it's like the main oil and gas refinery in Germany that works with oil that's coming from Russian pipelines. And Germany is, there's a very good chance that it's actually going to ban all Russian oil imports by the end of this year. And probably natural gas will take longer. Natural gas infrastructure, it's a lot more, and there's a lot more going on there, and it's got its own problems. But the oil is probably going to be, you know, shut down. And this town is one of these towns where the vast majority of its economy is centered around a single job, a single sort of industry, and it's this refinery. And if the refinery closes, people are going to lose jobs and the local economy will probably collapse. And they interviewed all these people about it and they all just kept saying like, oh, is this really actually going to hurt Putin? No, it's just going to hurt these people in this town and we're going to lose our jobs and like it's going to be hard for me to find another job and, you know, this, that, and the other. And it's like, these things are true, but the the report did not mention climate change whatsoever. And the thing is if we go off of the IPCC report, the we have 5 years to get off of oil, right? Like, we really need to be transitioning away from it. So those refineries are going to need to shut down anyway. And just waiting until the last minute, like, you know, we need to shut these things down. We need to move to other sources of energy. And we need to do it in a way that does consider what's going to happen to those people who lose jobs and what's going to happen to that town's economy. But like, if we look at the big picture, this is a, like, billions of people are probably going to have precarious work situations as climate change starts to affect us more and more obviously. And a lot of people's work and livelihoods and even just basic living are going to be, you know, in question. And so we can prepare for it, but we need to do so thoughtfully. And we can't just wait until the last minute and then be like, okay, we're shutting it down. And, you know, it's, yeah. And then I also think about how, like, driving infrastructure in general, the gas prices in the United States have gone up really, really high. And there's a good chance they're never going to come back down. Not really. And so it's already pushing it into being inaffordable for most people. Not most people, a lot of people. Sorry, I exaggerated. And if we think about that, like, what is going to be the long-term effects then? how are people going to function when gas starts to become like things like rent, where it's the percentage of your monthly income it eats up is so high? And at what point will it become not worth it to like have to drive to a job because you're going to just, yes, you'll still be making a profit, but like the amount you're making after your living expenses and car and everything is so low that it's like barely functioning, pushing people further into poverty and more trapped. I think about this a lot because it's like, it's the current system is not sustainable. And yeah, people could live closer to their jobs, but if there isn't good infrastructure in that area to begin with, like where their job is, that's going to be really difficult. If there isn't adequate housing, if there aren't sort of like, and people, it can't just be that you like live in some like completely boring, nothing like suburb, and then your workplace is like, 20-minute walk away, and there's nothing else to offer. We need more in life than just a place to sleep in our workplace, right? So we need to have areas around where people work that are also welcoming and have a sense of place and like offer people something other than you can get to your job and sleep. And yeah, Lo-Fi Prince, I like I see you've qualified for a gas loan and then your deep existential sigh. Like, for sure, this is a deal. This is a deal. We need to think about how we're going to manage this. All right. Then there's this other thing. I'm sorry, it's so tiny. It says Americans only love the college experience because it's the only time in their lives that they live in walkable communities. Obviously, that's not entirely true, but I think that's what a lot of people enjoy, especially about like college towns and visiting them, and why so many of them are also themselves sort of tourist destinations. Yeah, and Paladin Hulk, you're right, because if we're not careful, we'll end up with more company towns with company stores. And then if that company ever leaves, oh boy, people are even more screwed than before. And it's a kind of indentured servitude, and it's not great. Okay, so I want to move on to a little bit of something else I wanted to talk about today, which is disability, aging, and infrastructure, and like why George has a right to be so grumpy. So if we think about it, like these issues that I'm talking about are not just about like pure economics and like freedom and what's convenient and what feels nice. We also have to think about disability, and not just disability in terms of like in the abstract, because remember, being not disabled is pretty much always a temporary state. Most of us will become disabled at some point in our lifetimes. It's what happened to George, right? And, you know, it's really hard to make that accessible without good infrastructure. It's really hard to not just like have disabled people sort of be forced into the margins of society even further and have no access to participating in community and society. So I like this little video. It's in the infrastructure porn section. And we can see here, I just want to point out a couple of things. Like one, that you can see, like there's these brick cobbly streets, but then also the central infrastructure here is smooth, which means it's going to be a lot nicer to ride on, especially if you're using any kind of mobility aid. If I need to use a walker or I need to use any kind of, even if I've broken my leg and I've got one of those little scooters that I can like rest my broken leg on and go around, if I'm on a really bumpy road, it's going to be really difficult, and my wheels might catch and I could fall over. Like, I don't know if you've ever ridden like a scooter, like a razor scooter on like cobblestone. It's a nightmare, or rollerbladed, or even just bicycled. So having this nicer infrastructure here, there's good lights. You can see there's all of this. And even though it's going to cross what I think are some tram tracks, if you have them low profile and you have the pavement going very close to it, it's pretty still seamless. Obviously, accidents can still happen. If you approach it wrong on a bicycle, the wheel can go right into the little dip and you can have problems, but it does not have to be miserable. So let's just look at this video a little bit and see, how much this bike infrastructure can also be used. People also think about, okay, what about like elderly people and who are maybe not disabled, but and don't use a scooter or a wheelchair. And what's going to happen with them, or people who don't want to ride around it like unprotected from the elements? Well, in a lot of countries, especially in places like the Netherlands, you can get these little like tiny cars. Like think of what's it called? Like a Mini Cooper, but like even smaller and even more lightweight. And instead of having like, you know, an internal combustion engine, they're these little electric engines, or you can get them so they're modified bicycles, but they're in an enclosure. You're protected from the elements. They can have, you know, a back seat and a little trunk, and they're about the same size as this right here. Maybe just like a little bit wider and a little bit longer. And they're used in a lot of countries, and they're very, very useful for people who are elderly. And they really, really help with making it more comfortable and safer. And they can, because they can't go that fast, they can use sidewalks and they can use bicycle infrastructure. You would not want them on the main streets because that would be dangerous. But you can see here, like there's all this infrastructure. And what does this do? It makes it so that someone who's using a wheelchair can get around pretty fast and pretty well without too many problems. Obviously, there's little bits that could be a bit better here and there. This is always a work in progress. But yeah, it doesn't have to be this idea that the only way to transport people who are very elderly or disabled is through usage of large vehicles. There's many, many other options. And obviously there will be some people where those other options don't work, but we can think about this. And you know, George is lucky in the sense that he lives right in the downtown area. He's got sort of like prime real estate. It's very accessible. But it does not seem like things are accessible for him to do anything but kind of like putt around this city center. There are like, you know, the lakes areas. There's always stairs, or there's like, you got to go through all this grass and stuff. And so it's not like he's got easy access to that. And there's no bus out of town currently. And yeah, it would really suck to just be kind of trapped like in your house and maybe like, you know, within a 10-minute walk outside of it max. Anyway. Paladin Hulk, you said those tiny cars are leased to people who need them and they spend their lives paying for them long past the purchase price. Yay, capitalism. I did not know that, and that is very sad. Paladin Hulk, can I ask what country do you live in? I don't think I know. Okay, you live in the Netherlands. Yeah. Um, well, I'm sad that there's the capitalism element, but those cars are still lovely. Um, okay. So then another thing we can think a lot about is the right to sort of having autonomy with when it comes to how your aging is going to go. You know, a lot of us yeah, Reverend Mort, I'm sad there's a capitalism element, quotes for life. Yes, always. Um, so anyway, you know, another thing is a lot of us, especially, you know, I've never been old. I don't know, I've never been anything other than young. I'm definitely in like real adulthood now, which feels silly. But I don't know what it's like to be old. And I think as a result, this is, you know, obviously, we don't de-age. So we don't often know how to think about what our future selves are going to want and how we can best care for our future selves and what kinds of things that our future selves are going to need. There have been some really fun psychological studies about like saving for retirement and asking people sort of in the abstract and then showing people like computer aged photos of themselves and then thinking about that person and how much money do you want to save to take good care of that person. I mean, I think saving money and making it on the individual is a really silly way to do elder care, and I don't like it, but there are ways for us to have better sort of metacognition and thinking about our future selves and what our future selves are going to need and want than just the nebulous, I need to save as much money as I can for retirement. And some of it's also thinking about like connections to the places that we're in. It's not strange. Oh, thank you, Paladin Hulk. You put into the Discord some pictures of those cars. I'm, yeah, I'm really thankful. Thank you for doing that. So, you know, when I've been talking about things like placemaking and like a sense of place, it often includes a deep sense of connection to the area that you're in. And it's pretty normal if we spend a lot of time in one place to feel deep connection to it and a deep sense of belonging. It's not strange or weird how many elderly people are like, I don't want to go to a home, or I don't want to be in some sort of assisted living facility. I want to stay in my own place. And it's become kind of like a common source of like familial tension in narratives in a lot of TV shows now, I've noticed. Like, not now, but for a long time. But I think that it's become a sort of staple, staple conflict. And it's often under this idea of like, there's often this message in there that it's kind of like unreasonable, and the elderly person is just being stubborn, and like, don't they realize the imposition that they're putting in on everyone? Or of course it's ridiculous, they can't do that, look at how disabled that they have become, or whatever. And one, okay, it's like completely denying elderly people's autonomy and just pretending like they can't know what's best for them and they shouldn't be allowed to make these decisions for themselves. And it's also acting like if you cause any kind of inconvenience to anybody, you're somehow in the wrong. But it's like it's always a negotiation. And like it's not unreasonable to want to stay where you've lived for decades. Especially like, think about it. Like you might have most of your memories there of like a spouse who might no longer be alive, and children who you might rarely see, and like even just like good memories of yourself, and like different points of time in your life. And it's completely reasonable to want to stay and to age there, to want to die in your own home and not like in a place that feels alienating in some way. And a lot of elderly care facilities are not great. Even ones that are pretty expensive and nice, there can be a lot of elder abuse there. There can be a lot of neglect. There can be a lot of, you have so much less freedom. Obviously, there are going to be situations where there's no other option, really. And the amount of care a person needs to support them is beyond what can be done in a person's home because they need more supervision. We don't have enough of these kinds of nurses and occupational therapists and like assistants. We just don't have enough of that. And they can become really socially isolated if they're left in home. Right. There's always mitigating circumstances. And this article here, and I'll put it in the chat, has a really good sort of analysis of how, when polling people, most people who are aging want to age in place. So more than 50% want to stay where they are, but that we're not really prepared for it. And it doesn't just mean like mentally prepared, it also means things like accessibility features. How safe and accessible is the building you're living in actually? Especially if there are multiple floors, is there a bathroom and a bedroom on the ground floor? You might not always be able to get up and down the stairs as you age. And not everybody can afford to have one of those like scooter things that slide up the staircase installed in their home, or there might not be room for it. And then, things like door frames being wide enough for a wheelchair, types of door handles like lever versus twist, because especially if your grip doesn't get as nice, ramps, barrier-free showers and stuff, raised toilet seats. But, this is mostly talking about these very like practical, logistical things. But I also think about, is this space actually going to facilitate good experience of aging and good sort of like as you go along further in life? And are you going to still be able to be connected to people? Are you going to still have access to things like groceries and pharmacies and getting to your doctor's appointments and like going for walks and experiencing new things, right? It's not just about marking time until you die. There's also like, are there going to be events and community things that you can go to? are we setting up our cities and towns to actually be aging accessible? The answer is mostly no. Okay, in chat, a couple of you said some things. Paladin Hawk, you said, my mom used to work for the city where she would go and talk to the elderly about what kind of help they needed, like wheelchair lifts, handles in the showers, etc. Crit, which you said slips into a seat in the back of the room. Welcome. Hello. And I like that Paladin Hulk and first floor things super important. Yeah, and it's, like there's a lot of things to think about. It's not just like the physical, barriers that you might have. Those are obviously hugely important, right? Like having accessible showers, you don't want to have to kind of always lift your leg over a tub and then risk slipping and falling because your balance isn't as good having something where you can like open a door to step into and it's like pretty much level, and that's a lot safer having places to sit inside the shower so you don't have to stay balancing while you're like washing your feet and stuff. And like things being well in reach and all kinds of stuff, right? There's all these really important considerations. And it's also like not just the home, but the area outside the home. Is it accessible to the elderly? Is it welcoming to them? I think about when I go to a lot of subcultural spaces, there's a ton of ageism where it's like if you're over a certain age, people kind of have a weird suspicion about why you're even there. Often because we have this unspoken aspect of like these spaces for young people are only for people who are still looking for a life partner. And if you're past the age where we think it's reasonable for you to be looking for a life partner, it's creepy for you to be here, which is rough and makes me very, very sad. But also, like, yeah, it's just ridiculous. And like the social segregation. Obviously, there's some spaces where it makes sense to say, like, only people up to the age of 25 can be here because knowledge and just of the subculture, but also knowledge of the world and also these power differentials can come in. And it's nice and important to have spaces that are, in fact, only for young people. But we don't have to make it so that's everywhere. And it's not obviously just the elderly that we do this to. We do it to people like new parents. We tend to stop inviting them, especially moms. Because they often get the sort of lion's share of the work, rarely get invited to things, and places are not very accessible to small children, and we tend to think that they belong only in these like very specific children designated places, and if they're anywhere else, it's terrible. We don't need to do this. And I feel like this is very based around like consumer capitalism and like how much is the person likely to consume. And the more you're likely to consume, the more welcome you are in a space. Especially if the more you likely are to consume like specific things being offered there. And I think that this is like sort of trickled into our perceptions of who does and doesn't belong in different spaces. And I think that it's really sad. And we should just think about like thinking about our future selves, what kind of world when we're elderly do we want to live in? I often think about, I remember being in my teens and hearing all these like climate change predictions and like world population predictions, like all these really like doom things that were predicted for like 2050. And they were like, in 2050, most of the world's population will be over 60 years old. And me just being like, okay, cool. And then it occurred to me one day, that's me. That's me. I will be, because I like kind of had this idea of like, well, I'm young. I'm not 60, but it's forgetting that's going to be me. And like when things are getting potentially, if we don't act on climate change and all these issues, when things are getting really difficult, that's when a lot of us who are watching this now and in this community together are going to be starting to become a lot more vulnerable than we are currently. And so it's really worth thinking about that. Yeah. I don't have anything particularly hopeful to say here aside from go to your city planning meetings and like city council meetings and stuff and make sure it's not just the particular type of the loudest people in the room who get heard and listened to. And it's not just lobbyists. Make sure you're advocating on behalf of your future self as much as you can. Okay, so there's one article I want to read. I don't don't think we've read this one together yet. I'm pretty tired today, so if we have, I know I've shown it, but I don't think we've read it. I think we read a different one about human scale cities, but I want to read this one because I really want to get this idea into all everyone's heads about like what does it mean to have placemaking and human scale, and how is that going to affect our autonomy? How is it going to affect our ability to consent to things? How is it going to affect our ability to organize and like take care of each other and be good to each other and to our future selves? So this is from the Project for Public Spaces, and this is placemaking in the human scale city. I'm pretty sure I haven't read this on stream. For some reason, I'm having some deja vu right now. Okay, it's by Stephen Burke, and it was written in 2016. And it says the term human scale has shown up a few times in our hometown news over the past several months, as a coalition called New Yorkers for a Human Scale City has organized to fight Mayor de Blasio's sweeping zoning changes, among other things. The group calls for an end to the violence that real estate developers have inflicted on our skyline, parks, public areas, and cityscape with the proliferation of dramatically overscaled buildings that ignore the historic context of our city. Dramatic. With counterparts in major cities around the globe, these human scale advocates share a common concern about the impacts of unrestricted development on our neighborhoods. Project for Public Spaces is active in this internal discussion, or international discussion, but rather than directly protesting developers or luxury housing or zoning changes, we reframe the conversation differently. My audio's quiet. Oh, hello. Scribe of Nekoti. Yeah, I can put the article in the chat. My audio is a little quiet. Let me turn this up. Let me know if this is better. Let me know if it's better. Okay. So one of the things is I am definitely pro density because it's predicted by 2040, more than 60% of the world's population is going to live in urban spaces. Yay, I'm glad it's better. So more than 60%, right? So we're going to need denser cities. It is also true if you read the book Secular Cycles or any of these other sort of historical cycles, as societies collapse, urbanization tends to increase pretty rapidly. Cities tend to become a lot less safe and a lot less clean. And then there tends to be a mass exodus out of cities, with cities being seen as like the worst place to live. But it's also true that there are more people alive now than all the people who've ever existed combined. At least I think so. I'm pretty positive of that number. And so things are a little bit different in this particular cycle and the sort of like dynamics of history and all of the other things that are happening. And we need to be prepared for the fact that there's going to be a lot that we can't predict. Right? So densifying is good. Big buildings are not necessarily bad, but are they being built to last? Or are, like, as we looked at in previous episodes, being distracted with shiny things like gyms in the basement and pools? Krellin, and not quite, I think it's close, but something like 10 billion versus 8 billion. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just one of those things where where was I? Are we being distracted? Densifying is fine, but are we being distracted with fake luxury housing that's not meant to last? And after the developer has gone and made all the money they can from it, the building's going to fall apart and it's going to become, honestly, probably more expensive than is worth it to maintain the building. That's a big question. And also history matters. Reverend Moore, yes. Are we being distracted? Where was I? Yeah. All right. So here, I like this idea. Project for Public Spaces is active in the international discussion, but rather than directly protesting developers or luxury housing or zoning changes, we frame the conversation differently. Everyone has the right to live in a human scale city. One way to achieve this is through placemaking. So even if we have something that's really dense, hi Ice Bunny, I hope you're doing all right today. Um, and yes, uh, what was I saying? I'm sorry, I'm getting very distracted today. Okay. Yes, we could have a very dense city and we could have a city that has big buildings, but it doesn't have to mean we lose the sense of belonging or the sense of place or the sort of like structurally created community cohesion and health. Um, oh, I like your joke, Paladin Hulk. Dr. Kurt Connors is a big fan of human scale stuff. Um, Okay, so then continuing, let's define the human scale. In its simplest definition, creating a human scale environment means making sure that the objects that we interact with in our everyday are of a size and shape that is reasonable for the average person to use. That's why our stairs have a 7-inch rise and an 11-inch run, for example, and why our doorways are 80 inches. Of course, the fact that the building for the average person does not guarantee universal accessibility is an important but separate issue. So, a human scale, I think this is like taking a very, very narrow definition of it, but it also means like how far do you have to walk to get to a grocery store or to a pharmacy or to your doctor's office or any other things that you need or a place to just go and do things that are fun? Like, are there venues nearby you that you can get to easily so you can do fun things and like meet with other people? Are there things that are resources that you need, like libraries? Are there places where you can gather with other people that don't require you to spend money to be there? And to me, it's not just like very literally like the human physical spaces, because you know what? I'm only 5 feet tall. The world is not meant for my scale. Pretty much everything is too big for me. I need to have multiple step stools in my house. I like to wear platform shoes because it makes navigating the outside world a lot easier. There's not so much that can be done by that about that, because when it comes down to it, when we're designing public spaces, it generally speaking does need to be done with the average height in mind, and then we can add some things on to accommodate people who are much taller, much shorter, much larger, that kind of thing. I think wheelchair and like walker and stuff size spacing needs to become default, because again, not being disabled is a temporary state for all of us. um, Yeah, you're right, Ice Bunny. We are talking about urban design and autonomy and consent, like how the infrastructure that we create in a city or a town affects our ability to actually access our autonomy and have agency, and then to consent to things and to live lives that are good. And I definitely agree, more art that kids can play on. Yeah, kids are often overlooked when it comes to design. Just like the elderly are often overlooked, like we were just talking about. Okay, but this doesn't cover all of the ways people interact with the city. Often we use the term human scale to distinguish between those accessing the city on foot and those viewing it through a car window. Although both involve people, we use the human scale to refer to pedestrians, which leads to a companion term, automotive scale. This is a relatively recent invention, first cropping up in LA during the 1920s to describe a new development along Wilshire Boulevard, now better known as Miracle Mile. Developer A.W. Ross explicitly designed its storefronts to be viewed at 30 miles per hour, creating in the process an entirely different experience of the city and its streets. While these commercial and automobile strips are now ubiquitous in the United States and abroad, nearly a century ago they were a revolutionary development. So just think about that. Like, a lot of the way Paladin Hulk, you have good jokes. Good call. The Mona Lisa just isn't very kid friendly. I love it. Thank you. Uh, this is a wild concept to think that like people have been intentionally for like 100 years, a little over, been designing things to be interacted with from cars, and to like prioritize the experience of being a car person, like a person in a car, which is distinctly different from a person walking. And Ice Bunny, we've been talking about both. Um, we've been talking about the sort of like comparing the United States and North America more broadly, because Canada has a lot of these same problems with Europe, but Europe, it depends on where in Europe. Hi, Rodin, welcome. Where in Europe you're talking about, and a lot of different things can kind of come up. All right, so human scale can also refer to how people perceive a city. We have known for a long time that architecture affects emotions and vice versa. For a primer on this, check out Happy City or The Architecture of Happiness. I definitely recommend these readings because there's a lot of like subtlety in the built world around us that we don't even realize has a profound impact on our senses of our daily life. And, you know, I think a lot of people are aware that, say, the more trees that you interact with or the more green space you interact with, there's a lot of research that says that that reduces things like risk of depression, but also risk of things like developing lung conditions and everything. But there's a lot more to it than that. Even just thinking about like the size and placement of windows and how much you're allowed to view outside of your space, like bigger, wider windows tend to create a greater sense of connection to the outside. But a lot of new buildings have these like really tiny little dinky windows that are just kind of like off to the side and like seem like an afterthought. And then the height of ceilings. Having more height tends to make people feel more comfortable in a space, but a lot of modern buildings have very, very low ceilings, which tend to create a sense of unease and claustrophobia. Not in everybody, of course, there are always exceptions to this. Ice Bunny, you said, now I wish I would not stink so much in the architecture part of my profession. What do you do for work? I don't actually know. Um, okay, so I recommend looking at these things. And as it says here, there's an entire academic discipline called environmental psychology because the world around us does have an impact on our mind and our sense of our experience of the world, which is something we've talked about in previous episodes. And so this domain of psychology is dedicated to exploring the interactions between humans and their physical surroundings. Long before it was an area of study, dictators took advantage of the impact architecture can have on the mind by creating architecture at a monumental scale rather than a human one. They inspired fear and awe in their citizens. The architecture of fascism, especially Nazism, took this logic to its most extreme, enshrining National Socialism in the buildings of German cities to create what has been called an architecture of doom. In the words of the author, Dalen Sujic, Hitler used architecture to define and make possible his idea of what totalitarian states should be. The individual counted for less than nothing. By destroying the individual scale of a city, the tyrant believed he could usher in a new age. His vision could receive praise from some of the era's architects, notably Le Corbusier, who once wrote, Hitler can crown his life with a great work, the planned layout of Europe. While fascism went out of fashion after World War II, haha, not exactly. The style of architecture did not, and now you can see that type of monumental building in cities around the world, from massive civic plazas, see Boston, Albany, Tiananmen Square, to skyscrapers that dominate entire city blocks. See Midtown New York City, boring financial districts everywhere. Yeah, so I mean, like, let's just look at this. This is in Albany, New York, this plaza, right? Even though this is like nominally like a public plaza, sort of square area, it does not feel welcoming. It feels overwhelming. And like, I know, for example, if I'm working in this building over here, it's going to take me a lot of time and energy to get from here to there. And while I'm walking from here to there, there's nothing really for me to interact with, right? There's not like a little newsstand or like a place where I can get coffee or buy my lunch or sit and chat with people in shade or like, yeah, there's like trees and there's some like things going on. But this is like it always kind of reminds me of that scene in Neverending Story where you have to like where he had to pass between the like giant Sphinx sculptures that were gonna like laser him to death if he didn't go through with no fear or something. And um, it's very like, yeah, yeah. It feels very similar. It's very imposing. It does not feel welcoming. remember, density doesn't have to be bad, and density doesn't have to look like this, right? Like these are hideous buildings, and they make you feel small. And again, this idea here of like making the individual count for less than nothing, seeing yourself as a cog in a glorious machine. I mean, the same idea is repeated over and over again in many different ways of organizing the world. And yes, yeah, this it's funny that architect is to blame for the skyscrapers that are glass boxes. And and as you say, Rod, and those who that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Like we kind of have this idea over and over and over again, right? Which even in capitalism, we have this idea that like you got to hustle, you got to work, and you will be rewarded by the system if you actually are worth the system noticing, in a positive way, not in a negative way, like trying to unionize or something. But there's this idea that the closer proximity you have to like the wheels of power, the more you're going to be given. But it's always risky, and it's always tenuous, and it's always like requires a lot of sacrifice, and it doesn't tend to give people what they're looking for. Because what is that going to get you if you really succeed? A penthouse that also is very alienating, because yeah, you've got this great view of the city, but the city does not feel like a place where you belong. It feels like, looking at like an anthill where it's like, yeah, there's life here, there's things happening here, but I am separate from it rather than a part of it. Okay, so if the human scale is about perception, then we cannot apply a single objective definition. Each person views the world from a different angle. That means the human scale in any given community depends on what that community perceives as a human scale. So this is another point, because I've talked about a lot of these issues in every episode that we do, from different angles. And I really want to stress that I'm not trying to say that there is one right way to organize a community or to create, sort of a built environment or infrastructure. Different communities are going to have different needs. Some things should be consistent, like considering the elderly, the disabled, children, actually making it so that people have access to the things that they need, considering how needs can change over time. But lots of different communities can have different things that they want and different things that make sense depending on the character of the people that live there and the culture that develops. I do want to read to you some chapters and excerpts at some point from the book Surviving the Future, because it's about us having good lives after the end of the market economy. And it talks a lot about these issues, which is like we need to have hyper-local culture again in order to create that deeper sense of place that will help us then weather the trials and tribulations that are going to come in the future as things change. Anyway, I see there's a bunch of stuff in chat, so let me back up and see what's going on. Scribe, you said, while I recognize what the author is saying, I would argue that there is a place for grand monuments and locations that emphasize the system over the individual. I think those locations are important to the civic religion that representative government depends on. There's a difference between spaces that break down and remove the human scale and those places that use scale and architecture to communicate that it is a sacred place that represents our ideals. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it can depend. I mean, I live in Vienna, and there are all of these really, really grand palaces everywhere. And there's this one area that's not too far from the Volkspark or the Rathaus. And I can't remember what it's called right now. It's where like the really famous Austrian National Library is. It's like this huge monumental scale. And it's beautiful and it's impressive to look at. And I also just think about like when it was built and how much sort of like theft from the average person that it required to build that versus concern and care for other things. Now, that's not to say that we can only do things that are grand and beautiful when everybody's needs are satisfied. No, like we need art, we need beauty, we need grandeur in between to help people continue as things hopefully improve. And I think that it does not have to be dehumanizing in that sense. It can make you feel a sense of awe of something connecting to something greater. Like I think about a lot of like art, just art history wise, early art was often, there's a lot of religious art. For a lot of history, the way people interacted with art was in places of worship. And at least in European history, those things were often, the statues were created in such a way to be looked at from below, as were the paintings. And most people's experience of engaging with art was to look up at those things in a kind of its own kind of performative ritual of like looking up to the heavens and engaging with the things that are above you. Or, like a mosque being like really beautiful and elaborate, especially on the ceiling, and then you sort of feeling enveloped in this giant. I think if you ever can go to like the Blue Mosque, for example, in Istanbul, it's kind of an overwhelmingly beautiful experience because you do feel small in the face of like this awe and wonder at the like splendor of the universe and the sort of mystery of existence. And that is creating also a sense of shared space with other people because that's kind of the point you're supposed to get when you're here and you can have this shared experience with other people. So I totally agree with you. I definitely agree with you, Scribe. Okay, Paladin Hulk, you said those places should be places we visit, not places we live. Scribe, I think a square is a good example at a small level, and I agree. They are places to visit, not to live, like the monuments in Washington, D.C. Ice Bunny said in Copenhagen city center is a rule that buildings are not higher than the church towers. Plus, they have a ton of buildings that are 18th century and some older because the city got burned down. Reverend Mort, you said fair point, but there's a difference between scale that conveys a sense of this thing matters and a scale that conveys you don't matter. Scribe, I agree. It's one of the reasons I hate most brutalism. Yeah, we talked about brutalism recently. It's why I really appreciate the scale of the Art Institute of Chicago and other buildings on the museum campus. And Ice Bunny, you said Prater, but Wien is dominantly Baroque buildings. Yeah, I mean, I love the Prater. Um, and Scribe, I feel it's the difference between humbling and demeaning. Right, I think we were kind of all kind of coming to the same thing that like this grandeur, majesty, a sense of awe at things that we make, just like I look at a mountain and I feel a sense of being tiny in comparison to it. And I think about like how I will be gone long before that mountain is worn down into dust. And there's this a beauty in that, and knowing that like this mountain, no matter how many times I sit with the mountain and how much time the mountain and I give to each other, that there's a longevity there, but that also at some point the mountain won't exist either. And there's this sort of interesting sense of like scale and time and permanence and impermanence, and like it's really lovely, but I don't feel hated by the mountain, but like I kind of feel hated by these buildings. um, well, it's funny. If you ever come to Wien, let me know and we can hang out. Okay. In some neighborhoods, 20-story buildings would be a horrible monstrosity, but along Manhattan's Broadway, they create a beautiful and functional street. Nothing is inherently beyond a human scale. However, in practice, massive towers, blank walls taking up entire city blocks, and parking lots don't come out of a placemaking process. What does emerge are places with different things to do, local stores, public spaces, and walkable streets. They tend to embody the principles outlined in our guide to creating streets as places. And I also recommend reading this. It's a very interesting read. And I'm sorry, I'm getting so many messages from other people. I keep getting distracted. Not even people who are watching today, just like other people who asking me things and whatnot. Anyway, so if the human scale of any given environment is defined by its community, then the outcome of placemaking is a human scale city. So this is a big point of what I've been trying to talk about over the last sort of like 4 or 5 episodes, is that placemaking and human scale are things that go together. And human scale does not have to mean like, late 1800s, early 1900s, super walkable streetcar suburbs where everything is like quaint and like 5 to 8-story buildings are the highest thing you ever see. No, I mean, there's lots of different options. Like I think about, there was this city in China, whose name I always forget. I think it starts with a K. That was like literally the densest city ever created, and it was like a 1 by 1 kilometer block, or maybe it was 5 by 5. It was something like that, and it ended up being torn down because it became really unsafe and unsanitary. But like, there was a sense of place there where it was like super, super, super dense, and everything was really tall, and there was like schools and hospitals and like apothecaries. And thank you, Reverend Mort uh, Kowloon. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I recommend looking it up because that had a community and it grew very organically and it created a really intense sense of place. Was it very healthy for everybody who lived there? Absolutely not. That's one of the reasons why it got shut down, because things like respiratory illnesses spread so fast because of how unsanitary the conditions were. A lot of people got really ill because they never had access to any sunlight, for example. Yeah. And Scribe, as you said, however, if most of our cities were 5 to 10 stories, then we could fit most of humanity into a fraction of the space it occupies now. Right. We haven't even talked about just the energy inefficiency of detached single-family homes and how it's very likely that as our cheap energy surplus goes away, remember our energy return on energy investment problem and that sort of net energy cliff, that heating and cooling, just temperature regulation of detached single-family homes is going to become prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. Because like in this building, I benefit a lot from the fact that my neighbors downstairs would turn the heat on. And the fact that I also have upstairs, like there's only one side of my apartment really that is exposed to the outside. So there's only really that one direction of temperature loss. And so it ends up being really, really nice. My energy bills are a lot less. It takes a lot less energy to keep this place warm. And just because I have these sort of layers around means that there's already less sort of loss of the energy there. A little bit of a digression. Okay. We usually define placemaking as a community-led process, but another way to say this is that it is human-led. That is, change is driven by a group of individual human beings with names and connections to their physical surroundings, built environment, not solely by trends in real estate market, zoning laws, or large-scale city agencies. And as we need to keep in mind, placemaking is a process, not an outcome. So I'm going to leave most of the rest of this because I want to play some game today. We're supposed to be playing Stardew, but I have this quote here. When it comes to urban planning, we need to do a better job of listening to existing communities, engaging residents, and considering the long-term impact of rezoning on the people who have lived in our neighborhoods most, if not all, of their lives. Once a developer's shovel hits the ground, the die has been cast for generations. And this is the biggest thing here. When we build things, the choices that we're making now or have made over the last few decades, this is generations before anything is likely to change. And we need to think about that. It's not, again, for me to say that there's only one way to do these things. It's more the idea that like we need to be thoughtful and people need to be educated on, say, like how likely is this building to actually last and what will the costs likely be when things start to fall apart, and you know, how are the building materials being sourced? Okay, here's another, the rest of this stuff is just stuff I want to share with you all. This is a video I recommend watching, and it's about land usage. We've talked about land usage before. Remember, we talked about value per acre previously. And this goes into some of this as well, and how like solar punk, a lot of these like beautiful, super white, sprawling cities with all this green stuff on it, they're not actually very realistic, and they give people an idea of like what it is that a more sustainable future is going to look like. That's pretty far from the reality, because this would not necessarily be very sustainable. And you can see there's still just a huge friggin' highway through the middle of this. And like, it's not to say that these things aren't beautiful and we can't take inspiration from them, but trains. Trains. And also vertical farming and a lot of these other things are actually really energy inefficient, because nothing's more efficient in terms of energy loss, then plants just getting touched by the sun. So a lot of vertical farming is really lossy when it comes to energy, and not just in terms of like the heat and UV energy. There's a lot. My husband used to be really, really into vertical farming, and then he read more on like the physics of or like the biophysical sort of limitations and constraints that are created. And now he's like, oh, it's unlikely to actually ever be a scale solution, which is why we also should densify so that we have more farmable land. But remember, there's also the problem that we've used up most of the world's topsoil. And it takes about 100 years for 1 inch of topsoil to develop. We're dependent on nitrogen-rich fertilizers, which are interfering with the nitrogen cycle. Most nitrogen-rich fertilizer is made from natural gas, or really needs it. It's a big interconnected web, and we really need to be careful. Okay, so that's one thing I want to share. This is from Strong Towns, which you all know is another nonprofit that I'm a huge fan of. And I recommend looking at this episode of this podcast, Bottom Up Revolution, because this person is talking about wheelchair accessibility infrastructure and design, and designing more accessible, more accommodating places. Remember, we've talked about like, do you feel invited by the spaces that you're in? And that can change. Like, what seems inviting now could seem really uninviting when you suddenly have any kind of mobility barrier around you, and you realize, oh, this is only inviting to the people who are like of a certain demographic. And yeah, wow, some hot pink. You're right, Ice Bunny. Oh my goodness, Reverend Moore, you once worked for a company that pretty much existed only to help other companies greenwash. That is wild. Scribe, you were going to ask if I knew about Strong Towns. Yes, I am a huge fan of Strong Towns. I really appreciate their work. I like to pick up where they often leave off and talk about these issues as issues also of autonomy and consent, because these things are. So then there's a video I haven't actually gotten to watch, but I'm going to share it because I'm interested in it. It's, I think, a recording of a podcast, and it's doomer optimism, which is very intriguing to me. And this is talking a lot about infrastructure and the future. And then the last one is a great article from Teen Vogue, which is on rights and workplace retaliation when you try to do things like unionize, because being in a union and good union practices actually increase your agency, protect your autonomy, and tend to produce more consensual workspaces. Not always, but it tends to be better than the alternatives. Just some food for thought. Okay, so let's actually play some game now. I've enjoyed this chat. Let me get Steam open. Probably needs to update. Yep, it needs to update. No, so the George mentioned scribe below my channel is not Henry George, it's George from Stardew Valley. Because George is one of the few sort of like representations of someone who's older in the Stardew Valley world, and he uses a wheelchair, and he's kind of an asshole. But you know, mild spoilers, you can get to know him and he becomes less of an asshole. But then also things like restoring the community center does a lot. And we've talked a lot about how like community centers are a really good tool for building healthier communities with a better sense of place and more social belonging, and the impact that that has on things like mental health. And basically, I think George has plenty of reasons to be as much of a butt as he can be, sometimes because he's kind of getting left off to the sides, and like it doesn't take very much change in one's life circumstances to recognize how much we've set up society to not really care about anybody, to make sure nobody's needs are met. Okay, I'm gonna resize this, make sure it looks good. Oof, that's bright. All right. Let's see. This size and good. Yeah, there we go. Good ratio. Okay. Reverend Mort, you said sitting in a workshop doing electronic repairs where 99% of the work was screen replacement using third-party stuff shipped from China, Shenzhen, China. CEO comes in doing tours, pointing a bunch of insurance to boxes filed of random parts you never need to replace, going, we try and reuse as much as possible. And you're right, Ice Money, he's the disillusioned old grandpa. Okay, so we're finally gonna get to game time. Anyone who came here really hoping for more Stardew, thank you for waiting. I appreciate your patience, and I also like chatting. Ariel, Cast Farm. Cat is right here. She's very cute. I will show you so you can see my cat while it loads. Here is my kitty. She's always sleeping on top of my laptop, and she has a very bad habit with her brother of unplugging my webcam and my microphone. But it's fine. It's fine. I tried to get like heating pads that I could put on my desk over here that would like just be warm, and they weren't good enough. And then I like used one of those heating pads that you can use like for your muscles, and then my cats just got into huge fights over it. They fight over my laptop, but not as bad. Okay, it is. Oh, I'm glad, Scribe, that you came hoping for what I was doing. Oh, pattern zoning. Yes, and zoning is a thing that I love to talk about. It's a passion of mine because I'm a nerd. But yeah, feel free to talk about it as much as you want. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So what are we doing? It is Saturday morning. It's the 13th of fall. I got Still Pam is Thirsty to the bottom and Mare Short, so it was the only quests I got. All right. Let's see. Let's look at the fortune teller. Very displeased. It's been a lot of displeased spirits recently. Okay. Weather, it's gonna rain all day tomorrow though. So might go to the mines. Anyway, yes, okay, I can make another barrel. I'm so excited. Okay, gotta water some crops. Let's go over here. Oh, we got some mayonnaise. And we got some flowers ready to go. Oh my goodness, always happens. Oh, and the dog gets stuck on this scarecrow constantly. It's very funny. Hi, puppy. How you doing? All right. Oh yeah, I gotta put on my cowboy hat. This is game time. Cowboy hat time. Oh man, cranberry harvest. I'm so excited. Cranberries. Can't wait to make cranberry wine. It's so good. Yes. Yes. Okay, time to water these crops. So let's actually water them. Let's do it. Oh man, how did I mess that up? So when I think about zoning, as you can probably imagine, like most things, has a very racist history. And a lot of it was about sort of like making sure that it protected white people from living next to industrial spaces. It's also to like keep a lot of white comfort. Like in Massachusetts, there's this town called Hingham, and they have a lot of zoning laws that say like you can't have any neon signage. So even things like McDonald's and CVS and stuff have old wooden signs, and like that kind of zoning, sure, like cute. You can keep the character of a community, and like you can imagine it's one particular set of sensibilities about what is cute for a community. But then also zoning often included like, were Black people allowed to live in a place? And I'm not just talking about redlining, though that's definitely a big part of it. And sometimes zoning is really useful because you don't want to have people just living right next to heavy industry because that's not good for their health in a million different ways. And like lead levels in the ground, for example, like in dirt, tend to go really up near heavy industry. And like I used to live in a town where pretty much the whole town was a Superfund site. And probably that affected my brain development. Um, probably not the best. There were a lot of like where I lived, a lot of rabbits, for example, that were clearly sort of like mentally not all the way there because of not rabies or anything, but just because of probably the amount of lead that they were exposed to and other industrial pollutants. They would like just sit in the middle of the road in the middle of the day, and you could just like walk right up to them and like nudge them with your foot, and they'd just be like, "Yep, I'm here. I'm a rabbit." And I know that that can be one of the end stages of a certain type of paralysis, is one of the end stages of rabies, but this was not the problem. It was that it was a very unhealthy place to live. Okay, I'm gonna put these fishies in here. I need I need some food because my character is struggling. I don't. I'm gonna eat these. Okay, this is fine. I'm gonna eat some stuff. All right. Yes, I don't need to go to my menu for that. Okay, let's have 2 Joja Colas. I like what's considered trash. I didn't notice that until right now. And so some zoning stuff is really useful, right? Like, because you do want to have some rules, but zoning often gets in the way of everything, like being able to have mixed use spaces, which would create more walkable, more human scale communities. And yeah, okay, I want to see what people are saying in chat. Okay, Scribe, you said, I believe incremental construction on a grid and pattern zoning would solve a lot of issues. For those who don't know, the first means no subdivision projects, but cities being built on one street at a time. The second is open source building plans paid for by the town. Sorry, I jumped ahead. Paid for by the town that anyone can use for free. If you use them in the proper zone, the building is pre-approved, skipping thousands of dollars in fees and months of waiting. Krellin, keeping homes away from heavy industry is fine, but designating housing areas as only low density is not okay. Agreed. Scribe, and because it's pre-approved and free, the city can only include higher standard buildings, more environmentally friendly, that they otherwise couldn't mandate. Incremental growth can be high density. You limit the plot size, and people have to fill it up before another street is added. Oh, you were talking about zoning, my bad. Yes, I mean, you mentioned zoning, so that's where I was going with zoning. Grid and pattern zoning, different kind of. This is what I'm saying, is like some zoning is good. Some zoning rules and some like ways of building things can be much more sustainable. What you're talking about is very much like we build as we need. We don't just build for the sake of building and like speculation. And you can do some predictive building for sure. Like we predict that this is how much the city is growing every year, and this is how much it makes sense to like add more housing, for example. Like that's fine and can be even good, but you don't want to just have it be like, we're going to speculate that if we tear down this forest in this area or this like other place, that it will become profitable in the future because we're going to bet that this will become a quote unquote up and coming neighborhood. And as you're mentioning, Scribe, having mandated spaces for parks. Let me make sure I got both of these. Can I get both the chickens? Silly Millie has got, yep, 1 heart. Let me see this chicken. How you doing, chicken? Krellin has got 1.5 hearts. So then, making sure that like some rules, like Vienna has rules on affordable housing, and like new housing developments have to always include some percentage of housing that is intended to be affordable and housing that is meant to be like rent controlled. And that's really important. Like having that as an option for people can often be the difference between a place being affordable and being unaffordable. And I think it's really essential to have these options. Pretty sure, Krellin, that's more hearts than you actually have. Yeah. All right. All right. I'm going to save some of these gold star things because we've got that festival coming up. And I haven't decided yet what I want to use at the event. All these purple star fishies though. It's pretty nice. Pretty nice. I'm gonna put these other cranberries and stuff up here. Yeah, and I mean, I think Vienna does a pretty good job with a lot of this because it's very, 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 there's so much green space. We talked about it last time on the stream. I just brought up the actual numbers. Okay, 30 wood, 1 copper, 1 iron. Okay, let's do this. I think I have enough. 1 copper, 1 iron, and 30 wood. Okay. All right, all right, all right. Yep. Let's do this. Let's put this cake over here. Yeah, so zoning, it really depends on the situation, whether it's helping or hurting. And it depends on the kind of zoning. But having it rules about development is not a bad idea. And it often is really important to sort of make sure that as things go on, the long-term impacts of different decisions are considered. And it's not just like what's profitable in the short term or like what whatever mayor is in power at the time, like, you know, gets kickbacks for or whatever. Oh my goodness, I got some large eggs. This is going to be great for the community center. I'm so excited. No, do not eat the egg. Do not eat the egg. Okay, and I'm going to nope, I'm going to put out, no, some hay because tomorrow's going to rain and I might forget. So there we go. There we go. Okay, and I need a large white egg. Yep. Okay. I'm gonna take that up to the community center today. Goodness, it's only 5:30, but I'm already hungry for dinner. I just ate lunch before I started the stream too. Like I said, had a bunch of blueberries. It was great. So yeah, yes, I like what you're saying. So Scribe, you said, where every 3 streets there is a park that either continues through the entire length or width of the city. So it's like plaid with long parks crisscrossing the city. And around how is affordable calculated? Affordable here is Vienna has pretty good rent control. There is, if a building, for example, is built before World War II, there's a maximum amount you can charge per square meter. And there's some things that like adjust it, like do you have a really nice far view? Is there, you know, is the bathroom inside the apartment or is it like a shared bathroom for the floor? Some places will have that actually upstairs. The floor above us doesn't have bathrooms inside their units, so they pay a lot less in rent than we do because it is outside. And even though there's like a bathroom for each people or group, it's still like, you know, that affects things. I'm going to the community center, right? I can't forget. Food and hydration is important. Yes, okay. Ice Bunny said, do not eat raw eggs. I will never understand why people dump raw egg in hot coffee ruins both the coffee and the egg. I like, I've never heard of putting egg in hot coffee. That makes me feel kind of ill, but I'm sure some people like it. I do like eggnog though, especially with a sort of a absurd amount of rum in it. It's pretty great. One time Charlie and I tried to make eggnog and we didn't have any cream, and so we used butter instead, and it was terrible. It's terrible. We still drank it, but it was, I mean, because the point was fatty, delicious, and getting us drunk. But anyway, let's see. Where do I put this egg? Where does the large egg go? Is it here? I gotta bring 10 hay. I always forget that. I'm gonna have some wine soon. I'm excited for that. I'm gonna bring that here. Okay, not this one. I can't wait to be able to make things in a kitchen. It'll be so exciting to upgrade that. I forget how much I need to save up. but hopefully I can do that sooner rather than later. Artisan bundle, nope. Large egg, yeah, here we go. Okay, so I know milk, wool, duck egg. Yeah, I gotta get some cows. I got a lot of things I want to spend money on in this game. Apricot, pomegranate, honey. Oh, can I even build a bee thing yet? I can. I need maple syrup, coal, iron, barn wood. Okay. I should do that before the end. Coal. Yeah, okay, okay. I should be able to do that. That sounds nice. Um, yeah, you're right, Aradin. For me, eating out is something that was a luxury I couldn't afford for most of my adult life, and now it's something that Charlie and I can afford to do every once in a while. Um, yeah, I know I've talked about it a lot. I've mentioned it several times recently, including in a little bit of an overwrought Twitter thread today. But there's a concert happening here tomorrow in Vienna that I really, really want to go to. Cannot go to because of COVID, because my heart problems preclude that from being a safe idea. But it's also really expensive. The tickets are like $60 a piece, which is a lot. Definitely just a lot. And I'm very sad that I'm not going to this concert because, yes, I really want to. But again, it's not safe for me to do so. Okay, I can make a bee house. Very exciting. And a lot of it is just that the tickets are not affordable. Even if COVID weren't a factor, the tickets would be difficult to afford. But yes, yes. I mean, I also think that we shouldn't have to pay for where we live. I mean, that's my hot take. Controversial, unpopular opinion. I think that I'm going to put this bee house right here because why not? I think that housing should be free. Yeah, yeah. Again, I just don't think that there should be market solutions to things people can't really opt out of, and housing is one of those things. And I think that, yeah, it's just kind of not the best idea. Not the best idea. Wow, I am very hungry. This is getting kind of silly. My tummy is like grumbling. Grumbling. Yes, blueberries was not enough for lunch. Okay, when did these crab pots get things in them? Come on, crab pots, I believe in you. Alrighty, alrighty, alrighty. What else do I got going on? I feel like I should get a barn for cows so that I can get some cows. So to Timber, I don't think the beehive has to be closer to the plants, but I think that you can get special honey if it is closer to the plants. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you can more or less put it anywhere, but it's better. You get like special, you can like fairy honey and stuff. That's worth a lot more, and it will just be generic honey. Oh man, lots of interesting things happening in chat. This is a happening chat. It makes me very happy. All right, my pickaxe still isn't strong enough. I gotta go upgrade that, but I'm going to the mines tomorrow, I hope. I'm just gonna do some chopping and some cleaning up of this area because things are getting a little bit messy on the farm. A little bit messy, a little messy. Yes. Yes. Okay, cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. Everything's looking pretty good. Got a little bit more trees than is probably reasonable at this moment everywhere. Things kind of block my path. On previous farms, I had this like rows and rows and rows of the different types of trees with like cappers on all of them. And I put like cobblestone down and I had torches in between, and it was a lot to maintain. A lot to maintain. Okay. Thank you for all just like coming here to hear my strong opinions about lots of things. I have opinions on everything, and I'm glad that you all appreciate that because I don't know how to not have strong opinions about things. All right, look at that jam is ready to go. Let's make some more stuff. Where are those melons? Melon jam. Two more. Let's do it. Let's do it. Two more melon jams. Yes. All right. All right. I'm gonna pause for a second. I want to see what y'all are talking about. Looks exciting. Um, Ice Bunny, you say eggnog is okay, especially the one from Belgium that was so thick a spoon could stay in it. That sounds amazing. Um, Detroit, you've never had food poisoning. That's amazing. I've had food poisoning many times in my life. I have a pretty strong stomach, but like I've gotten food poisoning. Um, Scribe, you said, I mean, according to economists, to be financially healthy, someone shouldn't pay more than 35% of their income on housing, which almost no one pays today. It's normally closer to 50 to 60%. Yes. Yes. I would say that we are paying about 50%, maybe 40% um, on housing. But it was hard to find places that were below a certain thing unless you qualified for low income housing, which you have to live here for long enough to qualify for that kind of thing. The Chibonese are not really a fan of eggnog, but coquito, a similar drink from Puerto Rico, and it's super yummy. You have an aversion to nutmeg. That's fair. That's fair. Um, around I think the only people that wouldn't be popular with are the apartment owners. Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, yeah. Eggnog and advocat or liqueur are not really the same. I've not gotten to have egg liquor yet. I'm looking forward to trying it though. Um, I guess Scribe, said I fall more on the small town capitalism side with strong towns, which is funny since people hear me talk and call me a flaming communist. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think capitalism is wrong for everything. And I think that, the market, whatever we want to consider the market, uh, can be useful for some things. And I think that there are places where it does make sense. And I think there are places where it just creates a lot of harm. And like, I just basically think if it's not something you can actually opt out of, like healthcare, food, housing, that kind of thing, heating, like basic heating so you don't freeze to death. I don't really think that there should be market solutions to that because it, as we can see, just tends to not create very good results. Um, or there needs to be an obscene amount of regulation on them, which has its own problems. Okay. Um, I don't think that blueberries are only or enough for full meal. Yeah, I mean, like I had like 200 grams of blueberries, like a huge thing of it, and it filled me up, but not anymore. I got hungry. Um, and Scribe, I definitely think we need a progressive tax on land ownership. I would agree. Um, and lo-fi prints, pie versus cake, the most controversial subject. My GI tract just hates me. End statement. 100% pie, cake is too inflexible. I like them both. That's like people asking me cats versus dogs. I'm like, they're both wonderful. I mean, I have cats and not a dog, and there are things that I like a lot about having a cat instead of a dog. Like, I don't have to always get up at 5 a.m. in the middle of winter when it's cold outside to take my dog for a walk because my cats can just poop in a box in my house, which feels a little absurd, but whatever. Um, but I love dogs and I love cats and I love pie and I love cake and I love the song I like pie, I like cake. Uh, it's a great song. If you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. It's great for Lindy Hop. And I love Lindy Hop. Okay, Scribe, you said it usually happens after I mention progressive land taxes and capping rents at 35% of the wage of workers in an area so people who work in an area can live there. And then when I talk about how a land value tax would stop gentrification, people's eyes glaze over. Um, yeah, you're right, Krellin. Markets predate capitalism. Um, did you run custard pies went over cakes any day for me? Pumpkin, chocolate, grasshopper, banana cream pie. I'm getting even more hungry. This sounds delicious. Uh, dog hate detected? No, remember, I love dogs. I grew up with dogs. My family has dogs. We've bred dogs. I love doing dog training. I love helping people understand both cats and dogs, but like the ways that those pets like perceive the world and actually how to make your home more actually a multi-species home that's more accommodating to the way a cat or a dog because and mice and like rats and stuff because I know those really well. I don't really know ferrets very well, but cats, dogs, mice, and rats, like those are animals that I feel pretty comfortable talking about. The sort of like what did they need? How do you read their body language? I love dogs. I think we fail dogs a lot of the time. A lot of people have dogs, but don't really seem to want to have a dog. They just kind of want to have like a warm, fuzzy thing that loves them constantly without necessarily attending to the unique psychology of dogs. We just kind of anthropomorphize at them and think that they just need the same things we need and don't really think about you can pet a dog too much. For example, a lot of people don't realize that the more you pet a dog, the more it builds up their ego. And like a lot of dogs that seem really friendly and then just like one day bite somebody, people be like, oh, my dog never acted that way. I don't know how that happened, but it's like if you look at the dog's sort of behavioral history, there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of domination tactics like blocking people's paths or staring or that kind of thing, and petting a dog a lot too much can also make them sort of think I'm the person in charge, and so I have to be the one who's in charge of everything and takes care of everything. There's a lot of issues. So I love dogs. I think people fail their dogs. I wish people were required to take classes in order to own dogs so that we had fewer anxious dogs. There's so many dogs that are very anxious because they don't know how to tell that their owner is in charge and is taking care of things, and they feel insecure about everything. Cats, it's a little bit different. Cats really need routine and consistency to not be anxious. And it's been good for me to have cats because it made me not just have no structure in my life. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Carlin, you are the dog hater. Yeah. I mean, and I think that, yeah, and Lo-Fi Prince, you have cat allergies. Yes. Okay. Scribe of Nicoti. Is it Necoti or Nicoti or something else? I would love to know. For context, the people I talk to, for some reason I can't see this. See thread? I don't need to see thread. I just need to see the whole thing. I can't see everything. Okay, there we go. I see what's happening now. For context, the people I talk to think the lesson from the Nativity is that government mandates put an inappropriate strain on the market. Interesting. If Caesar hadn't mandated everyone returning to their towns to be taxed, placing a strain on the entrepreneurial class of inn owners, then Christ wouldn't have been born in a stable. So those are the people just calling me a communist. This is fascinating. I never have really thought about like this example of economics applied to the Bible, but something new to think about. I'm going to have to sit with this. This is fascinating. Okay. So those are the people calling me a communist. Sometimes I just don't know how to respond. Reverend Mort, you replied, tip, people who believe in the Bible usually consider the will and power of the market important, but second to the will and power of the divine. Yeah, so this is my like where I tend to understand sort of capitalism's intersectionality, or not intersectionality, intersection with Christian thought, which is that like God is sort of the one dictating what happens in the markets, and therefore, and then also like the prosperity gospel. So this is interesting. This is fascinating. I'm learning new things. This is great. I.e., Jesus was born in a stable because God decided so, not because Caesar wielded the power of big government. And Scribe, you said, as a religious person, I hear you. Yes. Okay. Now I understand what the chat was doing. Yes. Okay, lots of good things. Yes. Okay, let's continue. I made a bunch of money because I sold some jam and some mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is great. Yeah, I don't like the prosperity gospel either, Krellin. Yes, you're right. I mean, Reverend Mort, how can people think that Jesus was pro wealth accumulation? Um, double think, basically double think and like, yeah, a lot of things like that. Double think, I think, is a big part of it. I think that when it's really easy for you to kind of not acknowledge inconsistencies, or you could take the interpretation that like Jesus just didn't like a certain type of wealth accumulation, i.e., mostly a certain group of people's wealth accumulation, and that otherwise it's fine and morally permissible. It's just a certain type and a certain group of people's wealth accumulation that's bad. Um, we don't have to go into too many details there, but okay, cutlass, crystal dagger. Which one was the one I was using? I think it was the cutlass. It's like the swipey rather than the stabby. Okay. And I'm going to put these things away because we're going to go to the mines today. I'm not even going to check what the report is. I'm going to take this to the community center on my way there because I know I need a pumpkin. And then we're off. We're off. Yep, I'll collect eggs tomorrow. I put the food out for the chickens already. We're going. Going. Lo-fi Prince. I'm starting to think a lot about communism theory lately. I've been listening to the Revolutions podcast from the guy who did History of Rome. He really fleshes out the philosophies. Cool, I'll check that out. Oh, I forgot to bring my little hoe so I can get the little wormies. Bummer. I think I took a long way to get to this place, but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Yes. Okay, I think it's in the pantry where I need to bring this pumpkin. At least I hope it's the pantry. Okay. Okay. Animal bundle? No, but it should be fall crops bundle. Yep. And then I'm going to finish another one. I'm so excited. Yes, bundle complete. Bundle complete. Woo. Oh, and I get another bee house. Nice. Okay. Okay. This is good. Good, good, good. All right, let me read. Y'all are having such an interesting conversation. This is so great. I'm really enjoying this. Um, Scribe, you said, I was always taught it was to show that the value of a person was not based on the condition of their birth and that God loved us, so he sent his son. So it threw me for a loop. It seemed to remove anything wholesome about the story. Interesting, yeah. Critwich, are we sure that they read it and don't hear only the theology in the pulpit? I think that's a big thing. I mean, I think it depends on which denomination of Christianity. Like most Catholics, which I was raised, don't read the Bible. I read the Bible like 6 times because I was a weirdo. 6 times by the time I was in middle school because I was just like, cool, I'm going to read this. Yeah, anyway. Uh, Scribe, you said, I didn't know he was doing that. I'll have to check it out. Oh yeah, the podcast. Yes, Reverend Mort. I still remember watching one of the prosperity gospel preachers try and counter the eye of the needle bit, and it was stunning. Yeah, that was probably pretty wild. Um, Reverend Mort. That's why I prefer my holy texts. They have lots of cartoons in them. Makes it easier to read. Um, Scribe, you said, I always took it that we need to be productive and successful enough to take care of our families while still having leftover resources to help those in need / the community. You can't feed the poor if your cabinet is empty. The problem came from institutionalizing a relationship that keeps people from growing. Yeah, I think that that's not a bad interpretation of the idea either. That like you can be a lot more generous when you have more than you need to purely survive, right? Like, yeah, you can, if you only have this one piece of bread to eat, you can split it with somebody else, but you might both starve to death. Isn't as good as I have 2 loaves of bread and then we can each get one. Aradnu said, also, so many of the religious leaders today seem to forget that about Jesus interacted with religious leaders of the time. Reverend Mort, which is also why whenever I find a Bible in a motel room. I helpfully scroll some pictures in it. Nice. Maybe we should have a special episode on Christianity. I'm actually going to have Jessica Price on as a guest in a few weeks, and we're going to talk about anti-Semitism, but there'll definitely be some discussions of Christianity in there. And Ice Bunny said, I had relatives in East Germany, and corruption made you have a good life, and relatives in the West that can guilt you into sending all the stuff you cannot get. And I know that this experience made me very biased towards that ideology. Glorify Prince, you were raised Protestant but read esoteric Buddhism before I ever crafted. What type of esoteric Buddhism? Because I am an ordained monk in Shingon Buddhism, which is a type of esoteric Buddhism, because I am not a Catholic anymore, and I trained in Buddhism for more than a decade before I got ordained. So I'm curious what type of esoteric Buddhism you're interacting with. Scribe, you said the economic model the papacy supports officially is not capitalism but distributivism. I still haven't read up on that, so I'd find it interesting. But will I have bread tomorrow? Yes. And Reverend Mort, but anti-Semitism and Christianity and no connection. Yes. I would say it definitely does. I'm assuming you're joking, but if you're not, I would say it definitely does. It depends on the section, but a lot of the time, we're not just talking about Christianity. Christianity will inevitably come up. Yeah, you were being sarcastic. But for anybody who thinks this legitimately, there's a lot of connection. And there's a lot of weaponizing in Christianity of Judaism. Even just Marjorie Taylor Greene being Judeo-Christian values related to abortion, where it's if you've actually read Jewish texts, you would know that abortion is actually a fundamental right, and it's very important. So anyway, I'm just gonna go to the mines. I'm gonna go to 60, and let's see how far down we can go, and let's see how bad of an idea this is. How much are we likely to die? All right, I'm not gonna be able to look at the chat for a little bit because I'm gonna be focused on mining down, but we'll see. Oh, look, a frozen tear. I can give that to my future husband, Sebastian. Look at that iron. That's a nice little haul of iron right there. And look, I got all these snacks with me today. I came prepared. Oh yeah, down we go. Oh man, okay. Dust sprites. All right. Okay. And I got slime there. That's a very energetic slime. I think he wants to kill me. Okay, am I gonna get him? I gotta beat you. I got slimed. Oh, I'm slow moving now. Okay, that's fine. Let's chop some things. Choppa. I mean, I guess it's not chopping. It's more like thunka. Yes. I will definitely look at what everyone's saying in chat, though, when I'm done in the mines today, because I'm very excited by these conversations. But yeah, we're going to talk, Jessica Price and I, about anti-Semitism in the tech industry and related issues. I feel very lucky that I messaged her and she was down to come on, because I was like, this might be really weird to just be come on my Twitch stream and talk about this particular thing. This is a dangerous game right here. I need to get out of the way. I'm going to go over here to fight this ghost. So I maybe trigger fewer things like the bat to come after me. Okay. This ghost, they take so long to kill. They're very frustrating because they get blown away and then they take so long to come back, and you're like, okay, waiting. Oh, and now I get to go down. Okay, I'm gonna get this iron before I go down. It's nice. All right. Let's see. Can I make it to 65 today? That'd be nice. Yes, I will make it to 65. Fantastic. Look at that. We made it in a whole another 5. I wonder if it's a lucky day today. I would be kind of surprised, but maybe it is. And maybe they're like neutral or mildly pleased or something. That'll be good. So yeah, thinking about George, right? I kind of put the title about George because I want to talk about him because it's like, one, people have the right to be grouchy. People have the right to be yes, but people also have the right to not want to interact with someone who's being a grouchy S, right? Like both are true. I taught a workshop this weekend that was on like uh, if you're going to do like a safety team or consent advocacy in community spaces and events, and how you have to be like an advocate for everybody involved, and you have to recognize that like people are allowed to feel however they feel, and you shouldn't try to like correct people when they're having a hard time or tell them that they're being unreasonable when they're sort of like amped up, because that's actually going to make the problem worse, and they could be actually having like a trauma response. You can't actually know. And this was something that was really hard because a lot of people are like, well, what if the person is being, some kind of problematic in my space? And it's like, you always have the right to kick them out. You always have the right to say, like, I'm not going to tolerate this in my space. You need to leave. And they still have the right to feel however they feel about it. It's the same with like, in some consent classes, people have gotten really caught up on the idea that people need to have enough information. And if there's information that a person finds out and that they're like, later, I would not have consented to X, Y, and Z had I known this other thing, that means that consent wasn't very good. Sometimes it can be a real problem, like if it was things that were intentionally withheld or not. And people are like, okay, but what if someone's discriminating against you because of who you voted for or like your gender identity? And it's like, that sucks. And nobody owes them sex. You can always say no to sex, even if the reason is bigoted. Like, you're still allowed to do that. And this is one of the things that's, I think it's a difficult thing to hold in our minds, is the idea that, like, even if the way a person feels is because of something really messed up or bigoted, or they're being unkind or rude to people, they still have the right to how they feel. And like, we can't invalidate people's, because their feelings are real for them. Like, that's what validation means. It doesn't even mean agreement. It just means that you accept that someone else's reality is true for them and it's their experience. You can always set boundaries. Like, if someone's in your space and they're being a turf, you can say, like, sure, you're allowed to feel however you want, and you can't stay here because that behavior is not tolerated. Both can be true at the same time. So I say this as a preface to talking about George because he's not very nice to his wife, Evelyn. He's really rude. He can say a lot of like not very nice things. Evelyn seems to try really hard, and I think that his constant sort of like anger and, I wouldn't say verbal abuse, but just like lack of verbal kindness has a real effect on her, right? And obviously, like, abuse is a different kind of thing. We're not saying that like you're allowed to abuse. I'm always just saying you're allowed to think and feel whatever you want. The actions matter. So like, if someone like George is being harmful to Evelyn, it's not okay, or to Alex, his grandson. But we can't change it if we don't understand underlying causes. And George is very clearly indicated, as you get to go through his sort of character arc, that a lot of his bitterness is because of the ways in which he is pushed to the margins of society and the ways in which he doesn't have as much agency as he used to. There is this kind of tension in a lot of sort of disability activism that I've seen, where it's like, you don't want to assume that someone is suffering because they have a disability. Like, suffering with a disability is something you generally shouldn't say. And like, disabled people don't have less, valuable lives or anything like that. And these are all true. And if you are abled and then you become disabled, it's okay to feel some kind of way about it. It's okay to be like, oh, I'm losing my hearing and I'm not happy about that. This is not what I want. And my life will still be good. And, I could become part of the deaf community, and that could be really amazing, and I could find different kinds of meaning and connection with people there, and still lament the loss of things. It's a difficult road to walk, and I think with somebody who's in a space where they're like getting dehumanized just by the sort of structure of society, especially when they were used to having more agency beforehand. I got a coffee bean. That's very exciting. This can produce a certain kind of bitterness, right? It's the same with, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar to, it's not uncommon for people who are really beautiful when they're young to, when they age, especially women after, say, around the age of 45, they tend to become kind of invisible in society, to feel a lot of depression and tension because they're used to getting a certain type of privilege, and then that privilege being taken away is really sort of confusing. And I can't say that these people are like bad people or that they're wrong for how they feel. Again, people are allowed to feel however they feel. But, obviously they're coming from this position of like extra privilege because pretty privilege is a thing. It's controversial because people also tend to feel that they have a lot more right to touch and interact with and demand things of pretty people, and also, especially with women who are considered attractive, take them less seriously. So it's not just a pure being attractive is a net bonus. It is always a complicated thing. And I know I'm digressing a lot. So George has lost agency, right? And remember, autonomy is the foundation of consent. Like, you have the right to decide what happens with your mind, your body, your spirit, your information, your story. And agency is our ability to sort of act from our autonomy and exert our will on the world around us. And it's our access to power, our personal power. And because he is disabled in a world that is not set up well for disabled people, and a lot of sources of also just aging, sources of community belonging and meaning are not as accessible to him anymore. He's got a lot of loss of agency, which can then decrease his ability to actually live in a way that's in line with his autonomy, his ability to make decisions for himself. And it can be really tough, especially if you grew up being told that you have to be like the provider and you have to be in charge and everything. Clearly, he's got a lot of dependency on his wife for things like mobility and social connection. Yes, I made it to 70. Slingshot. Exciting. I like the slingshots when you get like little bombs and you blow things up. It's really helpful for when you fight mummies in the skull mines. So, that's rough. It's rough. Changing, a sense of identity changing. People, this is a common thing that happens with things like toileting. We're used to, when we're young, usually, depending on who we're talking about, but a lot of us are really used to being able to be completely self-sufficient when it comes to toileting needs. And as we get older, that can change, and we may need to rely on partners or care workers to wipe our butts for us, and that can feel really, really humiliating. Partially because we've got a lot of shame around genitals and bodily functions in general, but just also the loss of the ability to make the decisions for yourself and to care for yourself. That can be really, really, really rough. And I would say that some of it is because it seems like either because of economic reasons or just actual resource reasons, or maybe because that's what he wants. We can't actually know. There's a lot of conjecture in what I'm talking about. George is really reliant on Evelyn. There's probably parts of it that he's used to, like cooking and cleaning, but then there's the elements of like getting around, being connected to people, being able to interact with the community, and not getting to make choices about those things. The other thing is, if you look at a lot of his experiences of things like festivals, they're not often designed in a way that makes him feel welcome, right? They're often designed in a way that really prioritize a certain type of experience. Now, this is another issue that comes with community organizing that people can really struggle with. Not every place has to be for everyone. This is something that people can feel really guilty about. They're like, I need to be accessible to everyone, or I'm a bad person. And it's like, well, one, you probably don't want to be accessible to things like neo-Nazis, so you don't actually need to be accessible to everybody. But there's not always going to be the resources to be accessible to everyone all the time. And that's difficult to sit with a lot of the time because we don't want to, there's often a fragility there. We don't want to have pointed out to us the ways in which we can be failing particular members of our community or potential community members because we don't have the resources or the knowledge or the insight to making a space welcoming and accessible for other people. And it's not always possible. Like, if I'm running small swing dances and it's just me volunteering with my friends to like run an event, once a month at a local bar that has agreed to let us put on music and move some tables out of the way so then we can dance together, and I don't have money and I'm not wealthy, if somebody who is, say, a wheelchair user wants to come and learn how to swing dance, I'm going to end up passing out in the mines, I think. Bummer. Okay, I'm going to try to. I lost track of time. I'm going to try to run. I bet you the chat has been trying to tell me it's time to go. I wasn't paying attention. Let's see if I make it home. I might make it home if I don't run into the bushes. So, if someone who was a wheelchair user wanted to come and start dancing at my events, I couldn't make it accessible to them immediately. I might never have the resources to make it accessible for them to learn how to swing dance. I would have to assume, one, that they know what they need, or that they can make these choices for themselves, or some of them, like, respecting them as adults. But then there's the other aspect of, like, they might need to just be able to do it themselves. Oh my goodness, I actually am going to make it home and not pass out in the mines. I did it. Yay. Okay, sleep time. So the point here is that not everything needs to be totally level 3 combat. That's amazing. I got 5 more HP and now I know how to cook the roots platter. Not everything has to be perfectly accessible to George. And I would argue probably George feels pretty consistently that, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? Clear and sunny. Oh, I think it's the fair tomorrow. Very displeased spirits. All right, that's fine. Feels probably like he is an afterthought if he's thought about at all. And it makes sense that you would be kind of crotchety about that sort of thing. Like, if you can see that around you, you are not being considered ever, or like if you are considered, it's very, very, very much an afterthought. That's not great. That doesn't feel nice, and you would be well within your rights to be bitter about it. I know there's like a lot of layers to the thing I'm talking about right now, so I get it if I'm rambling. It's totally fair to think I'm rambling, because I am, for sure. So then, though, there's still the truth that there's a lot that's involved in this, and like George, how we can do better for George. So some of the things I would say is, like, actively including him more on things, getting his input on things, even if his input is just to complain and say how he thinks everything's terrible, letting him say things, letting him actually be part of stuff so that he can come and say, I think all of this is stupid and terrible, and here's why. Because he doesn't really have that opportunity right now to sort of be included in that manner. He's very much on the margins of things. Yes, look at this. I got some wine. So I can put some wine in the community center. Yes. And, like, how accessible are spaces for him? Can he go to events? Yes, he can. But there's still this idea of it's not a space designed for him. It's a space that he's allowed to go into, but it doesn't often seem like he was being directly considered when things were being constructed, which is surprising for such a small town, because it would not be hard to remember that George exists and is a wheelchair user and therefore should be accommodated in some manner. I'm going to sell one of the cranberries wine and put the other in the community center. Very excited. Okay, I got some mail. Dear Ariel, I just want to remind you that the Stardew Valley Fair is happening tomorrow. Don't forget to bring your 9 items for the Grange display. Remember, the fair starts at 9 a.m. in the town square. See you there. Sweet. All right. Okay, so I'm going to catch up on chat now. Okay, Lo-Fi Prince, you said, I need to find the specific book. It's still around here somewhere. So many emails. I need to do so much more work after this. But it's still around here. Focus on Tibetan traditions. It was an old book. Okay, cool. Krellin, I've been told when I describe Marx's socialist ideal of worker collectives and communes that it was distributism. So I'm guessing distributism is a form of market socialism. Reverend Mort, Judeo-Christian values is 95% of the way of saying Christian values. Yes, absolutely. Krellin, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian. Judaism and Christianity have almost nothing in common. Abrahamic religions can maybe sometimes be slightly correct, but a lot of Christians are very comfortable with being grouped with Muslims. It's true. Paladin Hulk, restless spirit and unfinished business. My sword will take care of that. Okay, okay. My schedule of 404s. I'm not sure what that means. Scribe, but like 404 not found. Anyway, Aradin, I think there's a difference between Christianity and quote Christianity, as I find the latter is often more used more as a rationalization and justification for hate or for political grandstanding rather than anything actually connected to Christianity. I say this as a Christian, although one that dislikes, to put it mildly, the religious aspect as opposed to the more spiritual and relational aspects. I think that's a big conversation. And I think it's one where there isn't an easy answer of like how much of the history of Christianity has become a part of its character now, like an essential part, versus separating, say, the art from the artist in this sense, versus like connecting with the original intention of things, which we also can't totally know, and simultaneously respecting the experiences and beliefs of people with faith, and that needs to be respected. Okay, Kurtwich, if you told most people that Krellin, most would have no idea what you mean, and think you made it up. And Paladin Hulk, I think that's a great topic for Jessica to talk about. Aradin. Scribe, people don't want to be pitied, they want to be empowered. Exactly. You're right. So this is a big point. You can have, there's three main different types of power. There's power over, power with, and empowerment. Power over is almost always going to result in non-consensual situations, paternalism, coercion, that kind of thing. Like if I have power over somebody, if they can't actually say no to me, then their yes doesn't actually mean anything. And power with is when we can share power, and empowerment is if I have power over, I can do things to give people essentially more no's, more ability to say yes but or no and, not just yes and. Scribe, don't coffee beans normally produce coffee? Yes, but you can grow them in this game, and they have this big like sort of exponential growth thing, and it's pretty fun. Young George equals Fabio Palinol. George used to be beautiful. Can I see it? I would say George is still beautiful, but I'm not going to get too platitude-tastic here. Okay, Ice Bunny, but it is pretty people. Is the pretty people thing not more a society demand and people jump on the cosmetic surgery and diet industries? So I would say like even outside of the cosmetics and diet industries, there are advantages and disadvantages to being seen as very conventionally attractive. Like I can definitely tell that like in America, people would often call me cute, but I was never called pretty, and I was definitely never called beautiful, with the exception of some people I dated. But in Japan, I was seen as like incredibly beautiful, and how much people just like did nice things for me and gave me things and let me get away with things went up a lot, even in comparison to other white women foreigners that I knew, who were not seen as, because they were like, for example, heavier than me, and Japan really prizes thinness. I was considered very fat in Japan, but like on the cusp of it was like cute fat. But that still being said, like I could see this like immense change in my privilege in that one dimension. There were ways in which I lost a lot of privilege living in Japan. It was complicated, but there was definitely this different types of privilege exchange that was happening there. It also meant, though, that a lot of people felt very comfortable, much more so than I've experienced in other countries, being very like graphically demanding of sexual things with me. And I don't think it was just like Japanese people in general. I got fetishized a lot in Japan. Okay. Aradin, also disability is not a monolith. What one person or group feels doesn't mean that they all feel that way. Exactly. Yeah, good point. Scribe, I have to admit, the idea of someone having to wipe me in old age horrifies me. I think that's a very common reaction. Reverend Mort, I mean, to a degree, you're talking to Ice Bunny. While being attractive definitely comes with some negatives, it definitely affects the way the world reacts and interacts with you. And losing privilege is both challenging and very disempowering. Aradin, given that I've been taking care of newborn kittens and have to wipe their butts to stimulate them so they can relieve themselves. Yeah. Oh, Scribe, you shared a link to a short French film that deals with losing full functionality. I will definitely check that out. I will open it up at the end. We'll make this the summer of George, Valid and Hulk. Thank you, Krellin. I'm glad I can ramble. Oh, when you go to my class schedule page, it says 404 not found. Interesting. Interesting. Huh. I will have to check that out. Thank you for letting me know. We have a lot of classes coming up. There's a lot of messages. I'm excited. Okay, Reverend Wart, you said, I mean, Christianity as a faith has been almost completely subsumed by Christianity as a social institution, cultural touchstone, and historical force. Yeah, I would say that that's definitely, there's a lot of that. Scribe of Neko tea. The coffee thing was a joke because you went, yay, coffee, with no trans. Okay, yeah. Yep. I mean, you're getting all of you a very good front seat to, even with medication, what my ADHD is like. I've recently gotten more consistent medication here. I am back on the Ritalins, and it's got its good points and its bad points. Ritalin is not my favorite ADHD med. It has a lot more side effects than Adderall does for me, and it doesn't, I don't think, work as well. But yeah, it's better than no meds. Water in my crops. I think I already said hi to my chickens. And right now I'm on a long acting one, which is better than, because beforehand I was taking short acting. And that's always tough because, well, it's got good points and bad points. Because if it's short acting, I don't have to remember to take it like first thing in the morning, because the long acting stuff is like 12 to 16 hours a lot of the time. Depends on which one. But, and so if I like forgot to take my meds until like 1 or 2, it was fine, because then I could just be like, okay, cool, like I can still take it. With long acting stuff, if I do that, it'll probably mean I can't fall asleep that night, which then means I'm likely to get a migraine the next day, yada yada. There's a bunch of problems. So there are bonuses to the short versus long acting, but one of the better parts of the long acting is that it's more consistent throughout the day. And it's like a nice ramp up and ramp down. Concerta, though, or Ritalin, methylphenidate, whatever you want to call it, tends to give me about a bunch of rebound symptoms. So like when it wears off, I'll get like the human equivalent of the zoomies a lot of the time. So I'll just be like giggling and like really hyper. It's like all the hyperness of the day just comes out all at once, and it's kind of rough. Sometimes it's fun, and sometimes it's actually really not fun. Especially when I'm like, I still have things I need to do, or like I'm at a work function or whatever, and suddenly I'm just like, ah! Because I'm definitely that kind of ADHD kid where I'm very much the like stereotypical hyperactive. In a lot of ways, I've gotten better at masking it over time. This is very, I'm being very creative with the ordering of this watering today. That's fine. I should plant some more things. And I'm digressing again. Okay, so George, how could we make things better for him? Well, give him more agency. He doesn't have a lot of opportunities to actually say yes and no to things, especially no, or to give stipulations. So that is a great example of why he's likely much more grumpy and picky about things, because when you don't have a lot of opportunities to actually make decisions in your life, you tend to take the ones you can get, and that also tends to make you kind of a jerk. And I think that that's a big part of it, for sure. Like at the beginning, I would say that that's definitely an aspect of why he is the way he is. He doesn't have a lot of opportunities to actually say no. He doesn't have a lot of opportunities to actually make decisions, as far as we can see. Now, that's also true for a lot of people here in this town. Like, this is not a town that's having a great time overall. And George probably had more ability to say no when he was younger, and that has changed for him. So it is not surprising that he's more affected by it. Look at this. Yes. Oh, I think I need a pomegranate for one of the things in the community center. Yes. I'll bring that over. Okay. Ice Bunny, you said, I'm fat and will never be skinny. I lost weight in the past 22 years not to be skinny, just to not get so unhealthy, to cut my life shorter than it could be. I was lucky that the doc in the hospital was, oh, we're not putting you on a diet. We give you all the information to have agency, make lifestyle change. Yeah, I mean, I think that agency and not just having people tell you what decisions should be made for you is really important. I think fat people's agency is often not respected. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah, and I would also say, like, calling someone disabled, calling someone fat is not inherently a negative term. I think it depends on how people are saying it and everything, but yeah, it's not a taboo word. Some people don't like it, and I try to respect that, and I fundamentally think that it's not a bad word. And it is just a statement of fact. And there's nothing wrong with being fat. I like to try to tell people that you have the right to be fat. Like, not just in like, you can choose, because it's not often, sometimes people choose, sometimes people don't. It's a combination of a lot of things, but like, you still have the right to be fat. You're not doing anything wrong by being fat. Another digression. Good times. What am I gonna do today? Tomorrow is the festival. So I got a day. What do I want to get up to? I could put this pomegranate in the community center, but like, that's not the whole day. What am I thinking? What am I thinking? I could put the wine in there too. Sell this mayonnaise. Let's see. Ooh, more foraging. I could do more foraging. That's always fun. So yeah, how could we do things better by George? Give him more opportunity to actually make decisions about his life that are meaningful. Make sure that he has opportunities to meaningfully contribute and participate in the community. He might not want all of them. There might be a bunch of them where he's like, no, thank you, I'm not interested in that. But that's still giving him the opportunity to say no, right? Whereas if you don't let somebody have the opportunity for certain types of involvement in a community, there's also not the opportunity for them to say no to those involvements. It's like a lot of people say that they don't intend to go to parties, but they still want to be invited. And it's kind of a similar principle, right? Having the ability to say no to something often feels better than not having been asked. Now, it can be rough because you might not want to say no to things sometimes, right? Like, saying no is not always just a positive thing. Like, I'm saying no to this concert, even though I really want to go. I'm going to be sad about it for probably longer than I should be. But, it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, let me go say hi to Mr. Elliot over here. Let's see how he's doing. What are you reading? What are you reading, dude? Elliot, hello, Ariel. Make sure and take breaks from your work now and then. That's good. Let's visit the farm. The chickens go bok bok. The pigs snort snort. The goats moo moo. The ducks go ack ack. The rabbits go sniff sniff. The cows go ooh ooh. Okay, you're reading a kid's book. Fair. Maybe you want to be a kid's book author. I don't actually know. Listen, mayo is amazing. Also, I have unfortunately not gotten to go to Sweden yet. I have been to Denmark and Norway, and I could speak pretty good Finnish as a child, because I had a Finnish nanny when I was a kid, and it helped me to remember how to say some nice phrases when I got to meet Apocalyptica in person back in like 2004. But yeah, not gotten to go to Sweden. I want to though. I want to. I mean, I'm very attracted to the idea of living in Scandinavia, mostly because a lot of my favorite bands are from Scandinavia. And I like the weather. Seems pretty good. Okay, Abigail says, I need to stretch my legs and get some fresh air today. Nice. Mayo with attitude. I love it. I love it. Looks like decent weather for fishing. Yep. Yes. Oh, you're down south, the Malmo, Copenhagen area. I'll buy you a drink of your choice. I have some friends who live in Copenhagen. They're like my main friend. I actually know him from France. He's a French guy who went and did his PhD and postdoc in Copenhagen. So I visited and I really liked it. Cool city. Lots of good sandwiches. Lots of really good sandwiches. All right, any trash that's good today? Let's see. Let's see. Um, I'm not Danish. I do have some Scandinavian heritage. Um, like did my ancestry, and some of my ancestors are Scandinavian. It's not like super super close, but it's also not super super far back. Um, I think it's very fun when I think about my own ancestry. I feel like I'm very very I'm a kind of person that really only exists in America because it's like I'm very multi-ethnic, right? So like I'm mostly Irish and Native American, Choctaw. Um, but then I've got like a million other countries in there, and I feel like you kind of only get that when you're a certain type of American whose families have been in colonizers for a long time. Not all of my ancestors were colonizers, obviously, because I'm also Native American, and that is a huge part. Like, I think I've shown everybody pictures of my grandfather before and my mom, so you can get the idea of like half my family's not white, half my family is, but the mix, the particular level and extent to which, especially my dad's family, is mixed. It's because some of my ancestors came on the second voyage of the Mayflower, um, and were around for a long time. There's good foraging today, even though it's like displeased spirits. It's not bad, not bad at all. Um, not that many little wormies out though. Got two good things, book and vertebra, but I never went to the community center. We have time. Let's go do that now. Let's go do that now. Um, but yeah, I went to Denmark and Norway in the middle of winter because I had wanted to take my honeymoon to the Arctic Circle uh, because I'm weird, I guess. And most people are like, I want to go to Hawaii or like Guam or something. And I'm like, let's go to the Arctic Circle in the middle of winter for our honeymoon. But there was no snow that year. So I didn't end up going up all the way to Lapland and instead did this really cool trip that you can get called Norway in a Nutshell. It's very much supposed to be like a short sort of highlights. So I visited my friend in Copenhagen and then I went to Bergen and I took the train. I did like a fjord sort of tour and then took the train to Oslo. And then I got to see my favorite painting, The Scream, and I cried because it was in the National Museum and it's fantastic and it's good. Good part of the honeymoon. It was not the only thing I did because we also went to we were in Vienna and then we took a train to Venice. Two screenshots. Oh, that was my cat. I was like, how did I take screenshots? Just delayed from a keg. Yes. Okay, that's exciting. All right. I only need milks and a duck egg or wool. Okay. Okay. I can do this. Greenhouse reward is coming. So yeah, we went to Venice and then we went to Belgium. We went to Brussels and took a chocolate making class and did some fun stuff. And then Denmark in Norway. Good kind of whirlwind tour honeymoon. That was also incredibly inexpensive because travel within Europe is not expensive at all. It's kind of laughable how inexpensive it is sometimes, at least currently with our cheap jet fuel. But the train's really helpful. Like taking a train that takes all day is pretty nice. Or you can like sleep on the train. Okay, what's chat saying? What's chat saying? Reverend Moore, who do you think I can't afford to get you people drunk over here? Or why do you think I can't afford? Yeah, I mean, because I take ADHD meds, I get drunk very, very quickly, which is nice because I don't have to spend a lot of money on it. I just drink a little bit and then I'm like completely just done and it's great. But my liver is very efficient and so I tend to process the alcohol very quickly. So I get drunk really fast, but I also get undrunk really fast, which is its own kind of annoying. It's a little hard to like be measured about my intoxication levels because of it, but it's fun. Okay, let's see what else everybody's saying. I'm going to end after this stay because I'm really hungry and I can hear Charlie has come home. Okay, but on Tori said, I looked at my ancestry because I was curious about it and I found out many of them were early Jamestown folk, evidently. Not the best people either. Yeah, I mean, like, I know some of my ancestors were pretty garbage people. Some of them were great, some of them were not. Lo-Fi Friends, hey, some of my family was on one of those boats, the second Mayflower. Cool, we might be related, or our ancestors might have known each other. Reverend Moore, insert joke about let's see if we can make our honeymoon so hot we melt the ice caps joke here. It's funny, but going to look around a system Bolgan is a candy wonderland of alcohol. Okay, see you, Scribe. And then, yeah, watching a Korean friend realize that we stocked soju and then realizing how much we charge for soju. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Reverend Moore, you said also for those wondering, we apparently charge something close to 14 times as much for soju in Korea. Nationalized booze sales is something nice, sometimes nice, sometimes very not. Yeah, I mean, I think taxes on those kinds of things is really important because people are going to drink alcohol and making money from it is important, and like also making sure people don't go too crazy. But import taxes and stuff can be really rough. All right, I am super hungry. I need to stop and go eat something. It was lovely to hang out with all of you. This has been really great. We got to talk about so many cool things, take a whirlwind tour. I got to know a bunch of you better, which is really exciting to me because I really like all of you. I like getting to know you too. I get to talk about myself a lot here, but I like getting to know you as well. It doesn't have to be super one-sided. You also said, Reverend Mort, for those lacking context, in Sweden, selling booze outside of restaurants and bars is exclusively limited to government-run corp called Systembolaget. I did not know that. New things. Thank you all so much. It's been really a delight. It's been really a delight to hang out, and I really love my Tuesdays, a day of the week that was normally pretty boring, nothing much to say about it. It's great because I get to hang out with all of you. And when we come back next week, it will be the festival, and so that'll be really nice. And I hope you have all a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you on Sunday if you come to our stream. Bye!